Hey, how's it going, folks? Just want to give you some quick tips on a short video if you're going to replace your temperature sensor on your stock surron motors. There's kind of a misconception that this job is, needed to be done by an expert. I'm mechanically inclined, but definitely not an expert. So, I mean, it's a lot easier than you would think it would be. It just, you have to pull the motor out, which is going to take, a little bit of time. Kind of not a pain, but not, quick. And then you obviously have to take the motor apart, which is basically you just have to take the cover off. So it's really not that bad. I'm going to give you some ins and outs here of things that you'll run into, but I'm not going to do a full breakdown of it. So the temperature sensor that you need, it's a KTY84-130 temp sensor. You can get these on Amazon, like a pack of 20 of them there for $20. And that's pretty much all you need. You'll probably need some sort of high temp sealant if you don't have it already. I already have some, so I didn't need to buy that. But so anything that's rated over like maybe 400 degrees just to be safe. I think this motor is good for anything over 300, but it's going to cost you the same either way. So just play it safe, get something that's a higher temp. And then these motors, they use a sealant. They're not using like a glue or anything like that, so you can't heat it up to dig that stuff out. So this is where the stock temperature sensor goes in. This is what that sensor basically looks like. But so what you need to do when you're going to replace this, you need to dig all that silicone out to pull that out, or enough to just get it released from the hole that it goes into. And then basically you'll fold these sensors over like this, probably a little more condensed because the hole's smaller than that. And then you want to make sure that these are heat shrinked all the way to the tip there, because you don't want these two wires to touch because they can short on themselves. And then you're basically going to solder connect it to your new wires, which see, I cut this because when you take the case off here, it's not going to open all the way unless you cut it, and you need to cut it anyways. So this just runs to the two pots on your hall sensor here, which that's the same wires that go to the temperature sensor. So a couple ways to test if your temperature sensor is faulty, if you're getting false overheats, or if you're getting if you have aftermarket controller and you have displays and they're giving you under temp or over temp warnings, is you can take an ohm meter, multimeter, and put it on the two pots here or on your wiring, and when it's cold, it should be right around 600 ohms of resistance. I'll put a chart up in this video that shows the different resistance ratings based off of the temperature, the current temperature. But basically, if you're turning the bike on for the first time and it's cold, your motor temp and your controller temp should be exactly the same. So if you have an aftermarket controller, that's a perfect way to know, like, yeah, my sensor's probably out of whack. And apparently there's a lot of variances that I've seen, getting most of my information from the Facebook groups. There's a big range of the people's ohm ratings on their temperature sensors. So yeah, these things probably go faulty pretty easily, but they can stay within a certain spec and it's not going to give you any issues. But mine was about almost 100 ohms above what it was supposed to read, so I was getting overheats when the motor was like cold to the touch almost. So that basically covers when you're going to replace this. You just make sure that your ends here are wrapped with the heat shrink, and you re-glue it with a good high temp silicone, and then you just reattach your cables by soldering, or I like to use those slip over, where it's a heat shrink and soldering combo. You just use a heat gun there. So as far as taking this cover off, there's a few things that I ran into that I didn't necessarily expect. I took the pulley off the back here because I thought I needed to take that off I needed to take it off anyways because I'm using it for a different project, which is actually going to need a chain. But for some reason I thought I needed to take that off because when I was trying to pull it apart, it still felt like it was stuck. So you're going to run into that same issue. It's going to feel like it's stuck. So a couple things that you need to note here when you're taking this apart is your phase wires here, the 3. You want to make sure that these little inserts that go into the threaded part are pulled out. Once you take off all these bolts, around all the Allen bolts, you're gonna have one behind there that's kind of a pain to get to. And what you're gonna have to do is when you're getting the motor apart and you're down to that last one there, you're gonna have to use a flathead on both sides in between the casing right here and the motor to start prying it up. And then also you're going to need to do that anyways to get this bolt out, because what's going to happen is the bolt's going to back out to where it's running into the threaded part, and then it's just going to stop. So you have to be lifting it to make sure that that head is lower so you can actually get it unbolted from the case of the motor. So those are the things that I didn't necessarily expect. So make sure these guys are backed out on the 3-phase here, 3-phase wires, because to get you room to pull the cover off all the way, you're going to need to push these back into the motor. And then also, I don't think you're going to need to unbolt your Hall sensor. I did that, just precautionary, but I don't think you're going to need to do that. So when you start to pull the cover off from the motor, you're not going to have, see, I have a little bit of slack there, that's maybe 6 inches of slack. You don't have that when you initially try to pull it off, so it's gonna fight you, and you don't want to yank it, because that's what you're gonna damage something if you yank it. So it'll come off pretty freely, when you're using the flatheads with mild pressure. But yeah, make sure these guys are off so you can feed those down in there, give you some more space, because see, it's all connected in there, so that's not going to become, you can't disconnect any of that. I mean, the only other thing you could do if you wanted to is like run those wires all the way back through there, but you don't need to do that. It's out of the way as much as it needs to be. And then clip your wire for your temperature sensor. So those are the 2 things. If you do that, this thing's going to come off pretty easily. And then yeah, you can get in there, dig that out, replace it with a new sensor, and then what would be smart to do if you have a multimeter is test that sensor before you put the motor back together, and then yeah, Loctite, and you should be good to go. I can't imagine anything else that you would run into that would be a huge problem. Throw it in the comments if you have a question or something. I'll try to clarify that. But yeah, don't be afraid to do this. Pull it off of the bike and tear it apart. Tearing this apart, I had some referencing from some people on Facebook, which definitely helped. But yeah, it was the first time for me. So honestly, once I pulled it apart and looked at it and figured out what was hanging up, it is really not as bad as I was expecting. So yeah, if you're mechanically inclined and it's your first time, it's going to take you maybe an hour, maybe a little more if you already have it off the bike. But